Sent from somewhere to my soul. How they linger ever near, and the sacred past unfolds. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul. In the stillness.
Good. How's it going? Got a new setup, right?
Well, I got speakerphone. We could have.
I see stuff.
Well, that's always.
Fly across the lonely years, and those on scenes of my childhood, and fond memory of days. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul.
Scanning.
In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes unfold.
Hello, Jimmy. How the world are you?
Others pray, Father too, on bended knee. Sun is setting, shadows fall, but their prayers still follows me. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul. In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes unfold. Precious memories fill my soul.
Oh, Jim Smith.
Yeah, I can't. You're such a tall guy. It's awful hard to find.
Where's Lennon go?
No, that's Chip.
Right here.
To the speaker.
I don't know. Now you see him, now you don't. Is that Phil? It is. Phil. That's how you recognize people.
I saw you coming
That's them.
in. This is my.
Is that Phil?
Hi, how are you? I know. Hi,
Yeah.
My daughter's name. That's fine. That's fine.
Just looking for that Sam Beard and see if we can sit next to him. Where do you want to sit?
Well, 560 can shine in
Oh, you're easy. She's running late. They're super busy.
Oh, sweetheart.
Unless we see you.
Oh, honey, I'm sorry.
Take a picture of that URL and tell her. So I don't know if you got it. Did you get it? Okay, that's good. Tell her to go to that link.
Yep.
We have some of this left over. I want you to do it. I'll go do it. I'm gonna stay here for the show.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in the right.
Okay, let's take some down there too.
I'm supposed to be doing this while you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Magda. Oh, no, this is the map. Oh, that was dark. Yeah. And there was two seats right here.
Okay.
Kind of right behind the markets. I can sit right He's right here. Right up front. Right up front. Yep. Uh-huh. Yep. So is it nice to have Sarah back there?
It's wonderful.
Same here. Well, I think he was going to, but they didn't need anything. Looking to see where he is.
There he is.
You may be seated, I think. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Kunkel, and I have the privilege of officiating in the service today. Well, the privilege to know Charlie Wood and his family. And today, we want to honor him and glorify God. It's good to remember as we grieve that we do not grieve like those who have no hope. And we know that Charlie going on to heaven, when and how he did, is just a perfect timing. And we receive that. Would you bow your heads and pray with me? Lord, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. The Lord will not let my foot slip. He watches over me and he will not slumber. He watches over Israel and will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over me. The Lord is the shade at my right hand. The sun will not harm me by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep me from all harm. He will watch over my life. The Lord will watch my coming and going, both now and forever. Amen.
Thanks, Steve. I was handed the sheet of paper. I was like, oh, you should read this. And Steve started giving us a nice little prayer, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh, I'm supposed to read that. I guess I'll just read it again then, in case some of you weren't listening.
That's perfect planning, Bob.
All right. I will lift up my eyes to the mountains. From where shall my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to slip. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will protect you from all evil. He will keep your soul. The Lord will guard you. Let me repeat that. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forever.
Hi, I am Charlie's daughter, Michelle, and that's something that I have always been very privileged and proud to be able to say. First, I just want to greet, of course, thank you all for being here, but also greet everyone who is watching on the live stream today, because I know there's quite a few of you. And especially, I wanted to say hi to my brother, Steve. You all know Steve, and his wife, Larry, and my sister-in-law. For no fault whatsoever of their own, they have to be home today in South Carolina. So they are not here, but I just wanted to say that we love you and we miss you, but we know that you're here. You're somewhere in that little camera. Just know that you're right there. There are so many stories I could share with you today, and each of them will give you some insight into the wonderful father that my dad was. There are stories like the one that begins with Dad saying, "Michelle, have you ever heard a rattlesnake rattle?" That was an interesting story, how that transpired. Or the more recent one about the magical combination that is Menchie's and reggae music. Another good story. There are stories about emerald lakes, killer waves, stories about a collie named Lad, a whole bunch of roosters named Charlie, and a tarantula named 007. I don't know if my mom's forgiven him yet for that one. There are stories about cowboy songs around the campfire, building dams and streams, racing sticks, pushing over dead trees in the forest. Stories about why we take pictures of our shadow, and it meant to he and I to share a look and point to the sky. And I could go on for a really long time, but there will be other days for telling those stories and more. Today, I just wanted to share with you one thing that I learned and that I expect a lot of you learned from my dad as well, and that is the importance of noticing. You all know my dad loved the outdoors. He loved being in it, and he loved introducing other people to it. But it wasn't just the big, breathtaking scenery that drew him. He was often most touched by the small things, things that are easily unnoticed. A small yellow flower that no one has ever seen because it's tucked behind a rock. The exact spot on this side of the mountain where the sunlight first hits in the morning. Or a rare type of cloud, you're always looking at clouds, called a horseshoe vortex that you'd never see unless you were looking closely, because it's fleeting and it's tiny compared to the whole sky. My dad taught me to look for those things and to delight in them, the little things. But another thing I learned from watching my dad and his habit of noticing is that it most importantly applied to people. My dad saw people. He looked at what made them unique and the qualities they had that made each of them special. He saw the potential in people, and he actively looked for ways to encourage that potential. He also saw the needs of people, and he loved to imagine what he could do to help and then do it. I bet every one of us here can think of at least at one time when my dad, when Charlie, invested himself in our lives and in making our lives better. And in this, he was a true follower of Christ. You know, his next to the last text to me, he sent the morning of the day that he knew we'd be making some tough decisions about his care coming up, his last care. And the text he sent, though, it was a reminder to me to trust in the Lord, because things were happening that would affect all of our lives. He wasn't thinking just about himself, he was thinking about the whole family. His last text to me was the following day, and it said, "Que tal, Maria?" which basically means, how's it going, Maria? And I'm not Maria, but that's a whole nother story also. But it's the way he often checked in with me to see how I was doing. So again, he knew he was getting ready to come home and was going on hospice, but his thoughts were on someone other than himself. So all of us in this room, I think, hold a lot of gratitude to my dad. And also, I think there's a challenge for all of us as we go forward to just think about what it is that we notice. So I'm going to play the piano now, and it's Dad's fault. There's a piece he loved, a Chopin Nocturne. And a number of times through the years, he instructed me that I was to play it at his funeral. And I always said things like, sure, Dad, okay, no problem. Yeah, whatever, very thoughtful responses. But now here we are. So I will play the Nocturne, try. And then I'm going to move into just a simple bit of music of me. That's for my dad and for my brother. And it's in remembrance of our last week together in front of the big windows. So when I play that, Adrienne will run some pictures up on the screen for you all to watch. So thank you for being here.
I'm obviously not Bill Renfro, but I am his wife, Kathy Renfro. And unfortunately, he's not able to be here today due to illness. So I'm going to read you a couple of things that he wrote. These are his words, not mine. So, Charlie Wood. I met Charlie at a Methodist Youth Fellowship meeting at Central UNC. We were ready to begin our first year of high school. From the moment I met Charlie, I understood why he made friends so easily. He had a knack for making everyone with whom he came in contact feel important, worthwhile, and capable. That's why so many former patients consider Charlie a friend first and their dentist second. When Charlie met my wife, Kathy, for the first time, he was able to tell her after a short time, "You are the best thing that ever happened to Bill." And I did hear that several times. Knowing Charlie meant that life was full of challenges, and along with the adventurous experiences, he urged us to be the best we could be. Like the challenge to traverse the Sandia Crest from Placitas to Tejares Canyon in one day. There was no trail for the first half of the 28-mile hike from Placitas to the towers on North Peak. I understand it was quite a hike. In retirement, when Kathy and I would visit family in Albuquerque, lunch with Charlie required several hours labor on his portion of the Pinot Trail in the Sandias. My reluctance turned to deep, satisfying fulfillment as I worked on that trail with Charlie and his crew. Charlie was in Baylor Dental School while I was enrolled in Perkins School of Theology, SMU. We were both in Dallas. Charlie decided that that it would be good practice for him, or Bill would be good practice for him as he learned his profession. One morning, he pulled both my upper wisdom teeth and did such a good job that I was able to play tennis that afternoon. An early sign of his excellence as a dentist. Years later, Charlie would work on my teeth during periodic visits here. My dentist in Austin, Texas, was also an excellent dentist. The two would comment on the other's work and formed their own mutual admiration society. And I was their trophy mouth. But Charlie was not perfect. I watched him lasso a mare as she ran along the fence. Charlie stood with the rope in his hand, proudly and satisfyingly reveling in his success, but forgot to snub the rope. And when the mare hit the end of the rope slack, Charlie was jerked off his feet and dove face first into the corral dirt. But to Charlie's tenacious credit, he held on to the rope. Here's a poem that Bill wrote in honor of Charlie. The essence of Charlie Wood. In that moment of ecstatic fullness, Charlie and I stroke in power-perfect rhythm. In bow and stern, we cut quiet waters, past wilderness beauty vistas, and sing out with lifted spirits, new adventures for arid dwellers. In that moment of self-confidence, after mastery of 3 sets of rapids, just a short paddle around the bend, and we are faced with rapid number 4. No portage this time. We're too good for that. Laden canoe approaches certain turmoil. In that moment of helpless surprise, the mastery of our fate is overcome. When we are spun apart by forces insurmountable, as flailing arms grasp for firm foundation, where there is none to be found. In that moment of paralyzing terror, Arms of strong currents crush our utmost efforts as we sweep past giant boulders. It is in this existential moment when our very being turns extremely inward to concentrate on survival struggle. In that moment of creeping despair, the chains of preoccupied self-preservation are suddenly shattered. When a courageous cry of empathetic love penetrates the deafening roar of cascading foam, Bill, Bill, are you all right? Bill's words for everybody. I am sure that nothing in all creation can separate us from our love for Charlie and his love for us.
Good afternoon. I love those pictures, didn't you? I love seeing Charlie's sweet smile, for sure. Dr. Charles Wood was my mentor, my friend, and his family soon became my family. After 34 years of moments with Charlie, I was blessed to have one miraculous moment just before he passed away. I knew he'd been dealing with leukemia and he was now at Russ Hospital. And so I was able to communicate with Michelle and was able to make it there one evening. So I arrived, it was December 16th. I arrived down to Russ Hospital around 6 o'clock and walked up to the room, and Michelle met me in the front of the room. We walked out together just to have a little chat to see how Charlie was doing, and he was tired and he was sleeping, and but she was informing me that that hospice was going to be coming. The hospice nurse was going to come to assess him to see if they could take him home the next day, and which I thought was just really great. But I was just dying to get in there to see him, so I asked her if it'd be okay if I could go in and take a peek. So I went to the room, and the room was just pitch dark in the room, and opened the door, and Charlie happened to be sitting up on his bed. And so I came up behind him and I said, "Hey, Charlie, how are you doing?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I don't know if you know this, but I have leukemia, and they're going to put me on hospice." And I said, "Oh, Charlie, so sorry, but hospice is good. It's a good thing. They're going to take good care of you." So he kept looking at me and he said, "Well, how are we connected?" And this is where God is amazing in moments like this. And so I looked at him and I said, "Oh, Charlie, you and I practiced together." So I pulled down my mask and he looked at me and he said, "You're Michael Haight." So I smiled. And so he goes on to say, and he's saying this, that God gave him all the words in that moment. His brain and his words were all together, and he was speaking to me clearly as I always remembered him. And then he goes on to tell me, "I remember the very first time I met you." So he shares the story of the first time that we met, and we reminisce and share, some of our favorite moments together and just laugh. And then I, tell him how much I loved him and how much I appreciated him, and told him good night, and I'd see him on Friday. So I first met Dr. Charles Wood as a pre-dental student at the University of New Mexico. This was in 1987. So he was a guest speaker talking to students about dentistry and why he became a dentist and his passion for taking care of patients and patient care. So after the meeting was over, I made my way up to him to say hello and introduce myself. I asked him if he'd be able to shadow, or if I would be able to come and shadow at his office someday. And then the next thing I knew, I was working for Charlie Wood. So some of the things I did for Charlie is, I worked there kind of part-time, full-time, depending on my school schedule. And I'd come in and sterilize instruments and clean up rooms, stock rooms and so on and so forth. And it was always a great time. And I felt blessed to be able to have a job as a college student working in a profession that I was interested in, which was, of course, dentistry. But not only that, I was in the best dental office with the best dentists, truly the dentist of dentists. But then there were the other jobs that Charlie had me do as well. As many of you know, he had a passion for photography. And I know there are many patients here who might remember the office. Up on the ceiling tiles, there were always pictures of his trips, that he took with his family, numerous places. That was me that put those up on the ceiling. Then there were other things that he'd do, like take his slacks to the cleaner, go, work at his house in his backyard and cut the pyrocanthus. And, but on occasionally, I got to take his Porsche out to get washed. That's the job I liked. So I was always happy to make an extra buck, and Charlie always paid me well. So there was this one Christmas in 1989, and this is one of my favorite stories to tell, but Charlie had asked me if I would be able to help him put up Christmas lights. And I said, sure, Charlie, I'm happy to do that. So I met him at the house, and he said, well, this year I always put up Christmas lights, and our neighborhood does luminarias. And so we're going skiing to Purgatory with the family, which he did so many times. But we're going to be back on Christmas Eve. And he says, what I'll do is I plan to be in Bernalillo at 5 o'clock, and I have this brand new phone, which is about this big back in those days, right? And he says, I think I can reach you from Bernalillo and make sure you're there at 5 o'clock, because Charlie, he was always punctual, and I'll let you know that we're on our way. So I'd worked for several days, getting every light on the house and all the bushes, getting things to go, and getting the luminarias. I even had to recruit my little sister to get the luminarias done. And I'm sure, lo and behold, it's 5 o'clock, and Charlie calls and says, okay, we're going to be there. Can you make sure that everything is ready to go to surprise my family? And so my little sister and I, hurried up and got all the sand in the bags and lit up all the candles. And the house looked like a Griswold family Christmas. Every light was going. And so I'm pulling out of the neighborhood, which they lived in La Sala Grande at that time. And lo and behold, here comes Charlie in his Jeep Grand Cherokee wagon with the wood side panels. And you could see his whole family with these beautiful, amazing smiles of like, wow, how do you pull this off? And so at that moment, I thought, I want to be like Charlie Wood. So, sorry. So, one of many things of Charlie that I loved, as you know, Charlie was one who, knew what he wanted in life. He knew how to do it, and he lived each day to its fullest. One of his favorite sayings was, yesterday is but a dream, tomorrow is but a vision, but today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness and every tomorrow a vision of hope. And he lived that way every single day. I finished dental school in 1995 and came back home to work with Dr. Wood. I tried all my life to emulate him, his sayings, because he knew how to say things really well. Pulling little girls' ponytails in the dental chair, which was the Charlie Wood thing. And just truly had so much fun practicing together. Those were truly some of my best days in my career. There are many people in this world that leave a legacy, and others who are legendary, and I feel that Charlie Wood was both. I've been privileged of taking care of his legacy of patients for over 20 years, many of which who are here. And each and every day, I get to visit with a patient that has a memory of Charlie and remembers how well that he took care of them and how he made a difference, not just in their life, but also helped them keep their teeth for a lifetime. This community and his friends and his family will forever be changed because of what Charlie Wood did to them. And he's still held in high esteem by all the colleagues. They all remember Charlie, for sure. Charlie was a man of honor and integrity. His desire was always to honor God in his life, in his marriage, and in his practice. I have precious memories of me, Sam, and Charlie going to Promise Keepers together. And I remember us praying together. I remember us having a great time always, lifting each other up, spending time in prayer, and asking God to help us walk honorably and be men of integrity. I'm forever changed as a man and as a practitioner because Charlie's influence in my life. So I'm so thankful for your dad. I'm thankful for your grandfather, and I can truly see Charlie's legacy in all of you. Thank you.
My name is Stephen Wood. I'm Charlie's son. If you're watching this video, unfortunately, it means that I've been delayed in transit and not able to be there. I sincerely apologize for that, as I would, of course, like to have been there in person. I had a wide range of topics that I could choose from when talking about my father, but I've decided to hone in on some of the reasons why I think he was so loved by so many people. One of the things growing up in Albuquerque is no matter where we went, if you went to a restaurant, to a mall, it didn't matter. We would run into somebody who knew my dad and would want to talk to my dad. And at the time, I assumed it was just because he was a dentist and all dentists were famous. But over the years, I started to learn that there was something more to it than just that. And so there's 4 things that he and I have talked about recently that I think kind of have give us some insight into why he was so loved by so many people. The first one is he was certainly fun. He was fun to be around. He had a good sense of humor. He always tried to make things interesting. But back in August, he sent me a text and he said, "Remember the time we drove the Porsche Delaney at 100 miles an hour?" And I said, "Of course I do." But that's not really the whole story. Because on that drive, we decided that we wanted to hear what the car would sound like at 100 miles an hour when it drove past. So I got out and Dad ripped past me at 100 miles an hour. And when he came back, he said, "How was it?" And I said, "It was awesome." He said, "Well, I got to find out too." So then it was my turn. And so the new driver got to drive the car past Dad at 100 miles an hour. It's pretty much a memory that I'm never going to forget, and certainly ranks pretty high on the list of fun things to do. The second thing is that Dad would always be willing to help people in a big way, and same thing with Mom. There's an expression in business: if you want to get something done, ask a busy person to do it. And obviously, Dad was a very busy man, building a practice, raising a family. But he always had time to help out people and help out in big ways. Not just, lend a helping hand, but doing big projects. And we were looking at some old pictures and we came across this picture of a massive paper mache tooth that was installed at Coronado Shopping Mall. Well, that was built in our garage with chicken wire and paper mache. It was for Dental Health Week. And this, huge construction project in the garage, and then taking it out there and setting it up all to promote dental health. That was a good example of the scale of the projects that Dad would be willing to pitch in and help on. The third thing is really Dad viewed everybody with respect and admiration. One of the books that he read, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that, was 365 Days of Walking the Red Road by Terry Jean. It's a book about Native American culture. I'm not sure where Dad's love of Native American culture came from, because it was already in there by the time I got to know him. Maybe you can ask Uncle Vern or Bill Renfro where it actually came from. But there was a passage in there that Dad and I really liked, and I think it summed up a lot about how he viewed other people. And it's ethic number 1, which is honoring the Great Spirit. Every element of creation expresses the Creator. Within each mountain, each stone, and each heart lies the Great Spirit. All are of the Creator. Each particle of the universe is equally deserving of respect and admiration. When looking upon a sunset, the trees, or even your worst enemy, you are looking at the Creator. Know this and give praise and prayer. I think that sums up kind of the way Dad looks at people. I viewed Dad, meeting and greeting thousands of people over the years. And he was always excited to see people. He was always respectful. He was always engaging. Clearly that was a benefit to his dental practice, but it was more than that. I mean, he really lived this principle of seeing and respecting people. The best way to kind of think about it is just think about the way Dad looked at you when you would see him. I mean, his face would always light up. He would be excited to see you. When people would call, you could hear the excitement in his voice. That sort of respect and admiration was really infectious, and people appreciated that. Finally, Dad wanted other people to have what he had. Dad realized that he was blessed, and he wanted others to be blessed as well. It was interesting, we were talking about the golden rule a couple of months ago, and it was pretty insightful. He said that, why do you want to think about things you're not going to do for people? Why don't you think about what you are going to do for people, what you want people to have? And I think that goes a long way to explaining why Dad would spend so much time mentoring not only dentists, but artists, restaurant owners, people raising families. He was always willing to give his wisdom and advice to help people achieve the things that Dad was able to achieve. My father was very full of life, and how you know somebody is full of life is their heart is filled with joy. The connection between joy and life is here in Psalm 16:11. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. And so when I'm going back and I'm thinking about my dad and looking at pictures and reflecting on stories and things like that, I try and think back to how full of life he was and let that fill my heart with joy, just like it filled his heart with joy. And I would suggest that you do the same. When you think about my father, think about how full of life he was, and let that fill your heart with joy, because that's what he would have wanted for all of us. Once again, thank you all so much for being here. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here with you, and you all be blessed.
Bobby, just a quick word with you. People on the outside would say that was poor planning, but it wasn't. We went to exactly the same psalm. I know at 11 o'clock this morning, God spoke to me and said, because I was going to do a prayer, I said, well, Psalm 121 is Charlie's song. I'm going to pray that to the Lord simultaneously in your sensitivity. And now, Bobby, these are things people have not been in full-time Christian ministry may not know how to do this, but what a moment. There are 1,900 verses in the Bible, and you and I landed on the same one. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? There's little I can add. But Mike, I'm like you. I want to be like Charlie Wood. I've wanted to be like Charlie Wood since Sam and Michelle married. And Sam started running because Michelle's going to do all these trails, and this older guy's running a lot of these trails. And Melissa and I started running a lot of these trails. I just saw that Charlie got it and treasured. A few thoughts, no promise for it to be quickly. First is we know where Charlie is. Sometimes we use poor language. We've lost Charlie. Charlie isn't lost. Charlie is in heaven. As Jesus was crucified, he turned to Heath and said, today you'll be with me in paradise. Psalms 116, verse 15. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his godliness. Our loss, great reunion, lived fully. And 1 Corinthians 2:9 again says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no human mind has conceived the things God has prepared for those who love him. We know where Charlie is. We know Charlie's influence. I've got to toss a few other things at that just because they're so meaningful. I've never really had a mentor per se. Never used that language. I've had friends. I've had things like that. But and I wasn't around Charlie enough to model like you got to model, Mike, from working with them. But I always view Charlie as a model. How he ran his business, how he loved on people, how he continued to do everything he could do to live fully with exuberance. A few examples I'll add to the story list. Melissa and I were on a plane to Dallas about 3 years ago. I think Charlie's probably 82, 83. Charlie was on the same plane. And we were going there to probably go to a football game, but Charlie was going to a reunion of some group from Baylor. And he flies from Albuquerque. He probably didn't tell Michelle what he's doing. He flew to Albuquerque to Dallas. Do you want to drive in Dallas? Have you driven to Dallas? Charlie's renting the car at Love Field, driving to Waco and driving back. I want to live that way. I'm an insurance agent, and they may try to take away my auto insurance. Well, I'm 82. I want to drive to Waco, just like Charlie did. Charlie and Melissa and I were talking one time about hiking. He was going to England. And we said, you've got to go to the Lake District. And there's one place you've got to go. It's Old Dungeon Hill. It's a hiker's hotel. They serve you all the food. It was wonderful. Have you ever gotten a call from anybody non-family from overseas? I have. Charlie got to Old Dungeon Hill and gave Melissa and I a call to say, here I am, I made it. 2 Peter 3:18 says, grow in the grace and knowledge of your Lord Jesus Christ. I can't grow. I can't get better in every area of my life, especially my mind and my body, right? But there are areas that I can grow. And Peter said, grow in the grace and knowledge. How do you think of a guy at 83 buys a really nice house? That's Charlie did at 83, and his enthusiasm for that house was mind-blowing. I went to the house, and I think Charlie kind of said, I never got to decorate anything before because Marcia probably did it. I'm decorating this house, And it's gonna be Charlie Wood style. And it was. Like 6 times he had me come back to the window to see the beautiful view of the crest. It was like a 45-minute tour. And it was awesome because it was fun to be with Charlie. I asked him, Charlie, did you finance it? He said, of course. Charlie was a businessman. He goes, it's 3% interest right now. Yeah, I'm financing that thing for 30 years. Loved it. Loved it. We all read the obituary in the paper, how he got his girl, ran his business. How Charlie handled adversity, though, blows my mind. He was a runner. Probably if he'd run slower with my group, he wouldn't have had the stroke. Maybe Michelle, because I'm no risk of that. But he has a stroke, and in his mental and physical toughness, he got back to his house during the stroke, and determined at some point, I think probably pretty soon, that he wasn't through being a dentist. He wasn't going to let a stroke define him. And he worked and worked and worked, and got back, and worked in his dental practice again. Same with sharing that the other dentists in town so admired and loved Charlie that they picked up work that couldn't get done. No pay. I never had a dentist. I'm like, you've done a no pay for me. Marsha's passing. Again, Charlie refused to let something horrible that happens in your life, losing your playmate and your wife. He wasn't going to be defined by circumstances. Excuse me. Thank you. There's a sojourner, a hiker, who went for Everest and got lost there. Body never recovered. Nobody ever found him. And a friend wound up putting a sign up at the foot of the trail. And it said, when last seen, he was moving up. It's Charlie. Father, how good you are, and how all of us who are part of Charlie's family have been blessed to know him and to be his friend. And Father, I pray for us at this afternoon congregation that we would choose, because it glorifies our God, that we would choose our best in everything. And that he said of us what we can so proudly say to Charlie, when last seen, he was moving up. Thank you for this time. Pray for Michelle and Steve and Tiffany and Adrian and Bobby and all the family. We love you. You're good. Amen. I'll turn the service over to the funeral home directors. Was something else? I was virtually sure I'd seen everything, but let me look at it. I saw that something.
Why you never let go of your notes.
Thank you, Steve. That was great, my dad. We're gonna sing a hymn now. Is this, I don't know. We're gonna sing a hymn. It's number 335 in the white hymnals. I hope it's 335 in the red ones, I'm not sure. It's Standing on the Promises. This is a hymn that my dad loved to sing. It's great face. And you'll notice we are using hymnal, and we are singing all of the verses. No, that's not about.
Is that one working?
So, these guys will lead us, so we'd love to if you join and sing it. Join us in singing stand.
You can't sing standing on the promise of sitting down, so if you'd all stand.
Standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises that cannot fail. When the loving storms are drowning, fear us stand. By the living word of God I shall prevail. Standing on the promises of God. Standing, standing on the promises of God, my Savior. Standing, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of Christ the Lord. Bound to Him eternally by love's stone throne. Overcoming daily with the Spirit's sword, standing on the promises of God. Standing, standing on the promises of God, my Savior. Standing, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises that cannot fail. Listening every moment to the Spirit's call. Resting in my Savior as the now and all. Standing on the promises of God. Standing, standing on the promises of God, my Savior. Standing on the promises of God.
Thank you all for coming. We love having you here. Michelle has chosen a number of favorite Charlie songs to kind of see us off with. The family is going to have a private reception at Charlie's home. Again, thank you for coming. You're welcome to stay and mingle and share Charlie stories as long as you want to. Thank you.
I live in a
Good to be with you.
I know it's nice. You can come in. Yeah, you would. I'm not there that often. I'm only there like every other Thursday and Friday. Byron Mall is in there.
I did. I found that out late, like right Somebody nobody knew it.